Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live broadcast, Testing for Soluble ST2, Opening New Perspectives of Cardiovascular Diseases, presented by Dr. Damien Grusson, a professor and the Associated Laboratory Director at St. Luke University Hospital in Brussels, Belgium. I'm Susie Valdez, and I'll be your LabRoots moderator for today's event. We're delighted to bring you this educational web seminar presented by LabRoots. LabRoots is the leading scientific social networking website and producer of educational virtual events and webinars. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this event is interactive. We encourage you to participate by submitting as many questions as you want at any time during the presentation. Just click on that Ask a Question box located on the far left of your screen and type your questions into the drop-down box that appears on the screen. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. If you have any trouble hearing or seeing the presentation, just click on that Help Desk button located on the promotional board at the bottom center of your screen, or use that Ask a Question box and let us know you're having a problem. Just a reminder, this presentation is educational and thus offers educational credits. Please click on the accreditation button located on the promotional board at the bottom center of your screen and follow the process to obtain those credits. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our presenter today, Dr. Damien Grusson. I will now turn the presentation over to him. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Susie. Very pleased to be with you today. Thanks a lot for the organizer for the very kind invitation. Happy to discuss about the perspective related to testing for soluble ST2 in the field of cardiovascular disease. I have no conflict of interest to declare. And as you know, as you can know the story, I'm from Belgium. We have a lot of good stuff in Belgium. The mannequin piece, the football team, I'm sure that they will go over the final at least in the next World Cup. And we have also good sweets or fries that can be very good for tasting, eating, but increasing, unfortunately, with too much consumption, the risk of cardiovascular disease. And we are facing, like all over the world, the burden of cardiovascular disease with more subclinical cases and acute conditions like diabetes, hypertension, myocardial infarction, and heart failure. So I would like just to start and set the scene for heart failure. As you might know, heart failure is more and more prevalent, about 2% all over the world. So millions of individuals are diagnosed of heart failure. The increase in prevalence because of an aging population, because of better treatment of cardiovascular disease like myocardial infarction, but unfortunately leading to later on heart failure, but also because we have groups of individuals like diabetes or people with hypertension that can also be with an higher risk of hypertension. You see also that there is different kind of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. There is different subtype of heart failure for which the diagnosis and the management has to be adapted. Hallmark of heart failure is also the length of stay or the impact on the healthcare system. So with a long length of stay, there is the risk for the people to stay in the hospital. There is also the cost of heart failure, and globally, heart failure costs a lot to our societies. Heart failure has really bad prognosis. You see the numbers. So once you are diagnosed of having heart failure, you have a risk of death, a risk of cardiovascular complication and a risk of readmission to the hospital, re-hospitalization. So clearly bad in terms of prognosis. Currently, if you look to the guidelines, even in the US, in Europe, all over the world, we are relying on biomarkers like natriuretic peptides to help the physician to make this diagnosis or rule out of heart failure in emergency care, for example, or to use these biomarkers to see how efficient is the management and if we can help also the physician in the monitoring process. So natriuretic peptides are in the top position for the management of heart failure. What is interesting to observe is that from the guidelines of the European Society of Heart Failure, we have a profile of tests which is recommended in this era of appropriateness of prescription, efficiency of lab test ordering. It's good to have such recommendation. We are finding some parameters like hemoglobin, sodium, potassium, hemoglobin A1C, TSH, and again the natriuretic peptide. So nice to get such recommendation. A lot of data are available in the literature showing that natriuretic peptides are efficient for the clinical aspects, efficient for the diagnosis in all group of age, efficient for the prognosis. But interestingly, and that's not so common, we have some cost effectiveness analysis demonstrating that introducing testing for BNP or NT-proBNP save money and are related to the improvement of the quality. So we have in the literature several papers, several articles evidencing this cost effectiveness for natriuretic peptides. There is also the other trends, which is monitoring of the treatment, so treatment guided by the evolution of the concentration of natriuretic peptides. Here also the evidence for the BNP or NT-proBNP guided therapy is increasing. So we have quite good standard of care biomarker with these natriuretic peptides, value. However, I cannot always come with good news. So I have some bad news related to the natriuretic peptides. First, we have to consider that there is a variability. Biological variation is important, and you see highlighted with the red square here that we are close to 62% for reference change value, meaning that in between two measurements there is a significant part of variation for natriuretic peptides related to the analytics, to the intra and inter-individual variation, and not only related to the impact of the treatment of the disease. So it's clearly high, and the physician have to consider the RCV to see if the change in natriuretic peptide concentration is clinically significant. And I think that as laboratorians, we must more and more use these RCV guided decision. Furthermore, there is always this question of specificity for the assays of natriuretic peptides. There is several circulating form derivating from the propeptide, the proBNP 108, and the different fragment, which could be the linear N-terminal fragment, which could be the cyclic C-terminal fragments, could be recognized by the different assays and there is not yet this standard available to guide the manufacturers to improve and get more specificity in the development of these natriuretic peptides assay. So there is some noise, which could be biological variation, which could be the assay specificity that can sometimes limit the value or the use of natriuretic peptides in the management of heart failure or risk estimation of cardiac disease. Still insisting on heart failure, do we have some unmet clinical needs? Yes, maybe, and I have just listed some of the potential unmet risks, which will be the early risk estimation. So considering we could face high risk individual like diabetics, like hypertensive subjects, how can we get this information that they will be more at risk to develop later on more acute cardiovascular event? And I think that here there is a space for more biomarker. A need clearly also in the field of heart failure is the support to the physician for the diagnosis of preserved ejection fraction. We know that natriuretic peptides could not add so much value in this disease, and we know that the prognosis of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction is at least as bad as heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. So need to be identified, need to be diagnosed, but we need something else in addition to the current tools. Identify new therapeutic strategies or new treatments, really important, like this hook curve could show. We had this early development of several treatments interesting for the treatment of heart failure. There was a decrease in the discovery of new treatments at the end of the 90s, and now are coming new perspectives like the angiotensin receptor and neprilysin inhibitors, or NI, coming from a better understanding of the physiopathology of the disease, coming from a better understanding of the process of some hormones or mediators related to the condition. These RNI are coming also as treatment option in the guidelines, even in the guidelines from the European Society of Cardiology, or also are mentioned in the guidelines from the US. These new treatments have the benefits to decrease the mortality, decrease the hospitalization rate or readmission in heart failure patients. That has been demonstrated in the paradigm trials. But these new treatments impact or could impact also some biomarkers by inhibiting the process of some natriuretic peptides, more in mind the cyclic BNP. So BNP testing could be limited for the patient under ARNI, which could not be the case for natriuretic peptides, meaning that we might also need for this new treatment, new companion tests to see if they are efficient or not, and if we have to adjust potentially the treatment. So facing all these needs, can we succeed? And that's a very challenging question, and we need You need to get these multidisciplinary team efforts to go over these needs. That's maybe where we could need more biomarkers. And hopefully there is a lot of researcher groups all over the world. There is a lot of efforts done by in vitro diagnostics manufacturers, and the evidence is that we have more and more players in the field. More and more players means that we have more and more hope for the physician, early diagnosis, hope for risk stratification, hope for patients. They see some new friends powerful for their disease management. Lab technologists, they could validate new technologies, new biomarkers. Us, as clinical biologists, we have new challenges, new opportunity to start the discussion with the physician, and also hope for our managers, hospital or laboratories, because decrease the length of stay, decrease the treatment dose or number of drugs could result by a more personalized based care based on these new biomarkers. These new biomarkers are coming from the different pathways triggered by cardiovascular disease, triggered by heart failure, and we are in this definition of subphenotyping or phenomapping the patient, providing the signature, the molecular signature of the patient could also be really important to adapt the treatment, select the best treatment according to the pathway which are really activated. These pathways are myocardial stretch, myocyte injury, matrix remodeling, fibrosis and inflammation, renal dysfunction. We have a lot of candidates. Not so much of these new biomarkers are already mentioned in the guidelines. I can take the example of what's appear in the European guidelines, and you see ST2, galectin-3, copeptin, adrenomedulin. We cannot talk of all these biomarkers today. I have therefore decided to put more emphasis on the measurement of soluble suppressor tumorigenicity 2, soluble ST2. The assay is available all over the world, and we have more and more also evidence in the literatures about this ST2. What is ST2? So ST2 is interleukin-1 family receptor that is expressed in cardiomyocyte. ST2 is the receptor of the interleukin-33. Interleukin-33 is a cardioprotective hormone, so it's beneficial to have IL-33 circulating. There is several forms for these receptors. There is a transmembrane ST2 isoform, and there is a soluble form for ST2, missing these intracellular and transmembrane domains. Soluble ST2 expression seems to be triggered by cardiovascular disease. And there is more circulating soluble ST2 in different cardiovascular disease. What will happen is that as much as you have soluble ST2 circulating, as much as you can quench or blunt the effect of interleukin 33. So you are decreasing the potential benefits, cardioprotective benefits of interleukin 33. So that's the scene. So we have this soluble ST2, which could be related to the severity of the cardiovascular disease. As much as the disease is becoming severe, as much as you are expressing the soluble receptors and quenching interleukin 33. There is a lot of data in the literature evidencing that soluble ST2 or the increase of soluble ST2 is related to the risk of heart failure. That's the case in this study in elderly subjects from the community. So the quintiles of ST2 were related to the development of heart failure. As high as ST2 levels were, as much as the risk was increased. They were also showing a relationship with increased risk of cardiovascular death. In patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, ST2 increased is associated with the worst prognosis in this patient and could add value to the natriuretic peptide testing. So really interesting to get these biomarkers, to have a more accurate subphenotyping of this patient and see who are the one with the increased risk. Interestingly, there is a lot of interesting discussion in the literature showing and demonstrating that maybe soluble ST2 testing, in contrast to natriuretic peptides, could be less sensitive to some confounding factors like kidney failure, like decrease of glomerular filtration rate, like diabetes, evidence on this slide. So this condition or these confounding factors do not alter the value of ST2 for the risk estimation in patients with heart failure or of cardiovascular disease. More and more data, as mentioned, coming, with also the evidence that not only a single point or a single measurement of ST2 could be useful, but the serial measurement over the lifetime in the hospital, the monitoring, the accurate monitoring of ST2 will be related to the prediction of the outcome, so serial measurement related to the outcome, and we have different patterns of patients, those monitoring by serial measurement of ST2 with the gain of value, those with serial measurement of natriuretic peptides with maybe less value for some patients, maybe blunted by this IRCV. So, serial measurement of ST2 important for the prognosis estimation. Thinking of this added value, the addition of soluble ST2 testing to natriuretic peptides makes sense. Combining the biomarkers from different pathways help to be more personalized in the prognostication and more personalized in the management of these patients. So, benefits in patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Benefits maybe in patients with preserved ejection fraction. There is a lot of ongoing study research for the biomarkers which can benefit to the physician, in addition to the natriuretic peptides which are less useful in this condition. Soluble ST2 is one of the biomarkers related to the disease, so preserved ejection fraction, maybe underlying the process of fibrosis remodeling ongoing in this condition. There is this evidence of the increase of soluble ST2 in patients with heart failure with preserved ejection, so clearly marked in comparison to the control groups. And the data showing the significant relationship between ST2 and prognosis in many conditions of heart failure. The other interesting point is that in addition to the diagnosis, we could have this benefit for the prognosis estimation. So soluble ST2 is a strong biomarker for the risk estimation also in this patient with ejection fraction higher than 50. So a strong determinant for the risk of patient with HFpEF. So adding value because of the increase in HFpEF for the diagnosis, adding value in HFpEF to estimate the patient with the higher risk. So soluble ST2 might be a very nice add-on to the physician and to the imaging data for the fibrosis. How to measure soluble ST2? We have several assays available on the market, and you will find a lot of validation data, which is interesting when you have to go accreditation process. So data available in the literature. Methods are the ELISA, so enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. ELISA are interesting for batch of samples. They are maybe the most documented assays in the literatures, but could be limited in terms of turnaround time. Interesting to observe that since recently there is also some point of care tests available for soluble ST2. They need to be validated carefully. You need to determine the appropriate reference value. You need to compare with the other methods. It's not plug and play from our experience in between point of care assays and ELISA. And important to train the potential users of this point of care, even in the even for lab technologists or nurses. But the clinical value for these assays seems to be there. They are related to the severity of the disease. There is data showing their association with biomarkers, and there is evidence also published linking the ST2 obtained by point of care to the risk of the disease. So relationship with adverse events. Do we need to consider some other aspects when there is this implementation of soluble ST2 testing? Yes, for sure. As you might know, labs need to confirm the reference values. We need to adapt the reference values for gender. So men have higher circulating levels than women. So the upper reference limit will be higher in men than in women. So consider to adjust your reference values. As I mentioned, we have maybe less confounding factors in comparison to natriuretic peptides. So the less evidence from the impact of decreased glomerular filtration rate, less evidence for the impact of age, maybe less evidence for the impact also of some associated condition. So interestingly, but need to be confirmed, you will find a lot of data discussing those points in the literature. I will say maybe the other advantage in comparison to natriuretic peptides is the decreased biological variability. 62% RCV for natriuretic peptides, around 43% for soluble ST2. So interesting when back to the point of serial measurement, you want to get this monitoring of your patient when you have reduced reference change value that will benefit for the serial measurement strategy. Anything else? Yes, maybe. I would like to show that we could benefit for the measurement of ST2 for the early risk estimation of group of patients with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, which could be diabetes, and it seems that there is a trend of higher ST2 levels related to adverse events in patients with diabetes, and later on the development of cardiovascular disease. And in patients with chronic kidney disease, there is a relationship with mortality and cardiovascular disease. What else? Maybe the therapeutical targets. As much as we are able to identify a new molecular pathway, new biomarkers, we could maybe define new treatment strategies or get a more personalized, more tailored treatment. If we do not observe any change in the serial measurement of soluble ST2, that may be that the management or the treatments selected are not the best appropriated to the patient. There is documentation in the literature that a soluble ST2 could be a nice add-on to the treatment by aldosterone blockers, or there is also some data showing that you can be more efficient in selecting the patient benefiting from beta blockers, also by measuring soluble ST2. We observe a relationship between soluble ST2 and vitamin D. As low the vitamin D levels were, as much ST2, soluble ST2 were increased, meaning that you need to be careful to the supplementation of vitamin D to avoid the increase of soluble ST2 and therefore the risk related to the quench of IL-33. What else? Communication. Communication will be key if you want to implement a new test. So go and talk to the physician to understand what they want. To go and talk to the physician to understand what are the unmet needs and clinical challenge related to some conditions, to cardiovascular disease. Go and talk to the physician and to the nurses to present them the characteristic of the assay that you will implement, to present them what could be the pre-analytic determinants, what are the confounding factors. So that's a clear job for laboratorians. The laboratorians are the consultant for the physician and the clinical team. And as we are implementing biomarkers like soluble ST2 or new biomarkers, we have also the potential to reinforce the collaboration with the clinical teams and benefits to the patient. Okay, that's where my message is for today. It's crystal clear that it's not always easy to implement new biomarker in the routine, to implement new biomarkers that could help for the diagnosis, prognosis, new biomarkers that could help as companion tests. To do so, we need a careful preparation, a careful assessment, careful validation. I'm at Victoria Kuram, victory loves careful preparation, and we are actors in this preparation of victory. And I would like to thank again the organizer for inviting me, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Gruson, for that informative presentation. We will now start the live Q&A portion of our webinar. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please do so now. Just click on that Ask a Question drop-down box located on the far left of your presentation window. Type that question into the box that appears on your screen and click the Send button. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for. So let's take a look at our questions already coming in from our audience members. Dr. Gruson, our first question coming in is, do you see ST2 as a biomarker for diagnosis or prognosis?
Okay, thanks, Susie. I think that we need to consider the disease. I think that if we are in the early risk assessment in patients with already diabetes and hypertension or kidney failure, we should see ST2 as a risk marker. I will say also that in a patient with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, we should see ST2 as a risk biomarkers adding value to natriuretic peptides. We have the standard of care for the diagnosis, natriuretic peptides, but we can gain from ST2 testing. I will say maybe the question is more difficult in patients with preserved ejection fraction, where it could help for the diagnosis. And we know, and the data seems to show that there is also a benefit for a risk estimation. So depending on the condition, the benefit could be the risk estimation or the diagnosis.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Gruson, what could be the advantages of ST2 testing over natriuretic peptides?
Okay, so advantages will be it's not the same pathway, so could provide a more accurate subphenotyping for the patient. More accurate subphenotyping could lead to a more personalized care. So advantage will be maybe the companion diagnosis. Advantages over natriuretic peptides because maybe less confounding factors, and maybe also because more limited biological variability. The inconvenient may be that the tests are not yet in full routine everywhere, so the accessibility to the assay may be one of the limits.
Thank you. And I also want to thank our audience members for their questions today and remind them that any questions not answered today will be answered via email. We have one more question coming in. What is your opinion, Dr. Gruson, about companion testing?
Okay, companion testing in the era of precision and personalized medicine, they are mandatory. They are mandatory because we have the tools. We have the tools coming from molecular testing. We have the tools coming from proteomic testing for biomarkers. We have the tools. We should use the assays to select the treatment, facing patient which could be maybe a bad responder to a treatment, or select treatment based on a phenotype. So identifying the phenotype could lead to a decision to select the appropriate treatment. If we are more efficient in companion testing selection, if we are more efficient in drug selection, we have benefits for a more the clinical benefits, so more treatment efficiency. We have the benefits in terms of cost. Selecting the best drug or the most appropriate drug early on will result also in cost effectiveness.
Thank you, Dr. Gruson, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your important research. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to provide our audience members before we close today?
No, okay, thanks, Susie, for moderating me. Appreciate that. We'll say that, okay, many biomarkers incoming. If we want to make it really efficient, useful, we need to get this multidisciplinary exchange in between laboratory communities, researchers, IVD, and physicians. So that's a key for implementation.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Dr. Gruson, for your presentation. And I'd also like to thank LabRoots for making today's educational webcast possible. Before we go, I want to remind audience members that today's webcast will be available for on-demand viewing through May of 2018. You'll receive an email from LabRoots letting you know that this webcast will be available for replay. Please share that announcement with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. That's all for now, and thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.